Right. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're doing well. This is United vs. Everybody. I am your host, Sean, and we are back. It is the season premiere of What If. I know it's been a couple months. The summer is for enjoying and for talking transfers, but season 3 of What If is back. If you've been following along with the first two seasons, this is where we kind of take a closer look at some of those moments that, maybe during a live stream or in the comments and the chats or whatever, a question or a thought or a concept pops up that kind of makes you stop and go, huh, right? You know what I'm talking about. Like the moments that make you wonder, what might have been, what if? That's what this series is about. It's a little fun, it's a little imaginative, but I got to tell you, it is all based on legitimate fact, legitimate, information that and possibilities that happen. There are actual things that happened at the key points during these what if episodes that could have very, very easily gone the other way. And that's what we're here to explore. This is episode 9, but the first episode of season 3. And we're going to take a look today at what might have been had Man United not completely messed up one of the best decisions that the club's actually made in many, many years. What if United had one of the best recruitment and structure building figures spearheading this proper rebuild? What if Ralf Rangnick had never made his infamous open heart surgery remark and subsequently was not sacked as by Manchester United after his interim spell as head coach? So that's what we're talking about today. So make sure you're liking the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you are new, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. Go check out the United vs. Everybody store. And if you like the what if concept, if you've been following along and you think they're fun, you think that maybe even if you learned a little bit, check out the memberships to learn how you can get involved and maybe turn some of your suggestions and ideas for future episodes into an actual episode. You will, of course, get full credit. We will shout it out if your idea is chosen, but the membership is the best way to do that. So go check it out. Let's get stuck in, everybody. So let's rewind the clock back. You guys remember when we appointed Ralf Rangnick at Manchester United? I don't know about you, but I got to be honest. That was probably the most excited I've been in a while, and hopeful, really, as a United fan, because I knew we were way behind, right, when it came to a proper footballing structure, and when it comes to building clubs, recruitment, talent identification. I mean, Ralf Rangnick is kind of the OG in that regard. The guy basically turned around Hoffenheim, turned Leipzig into what it is today. Even tactically, I mean, he's had a hand in so many German managers' philosophies. You can see his fingerprints in guys like Nagelsmann, Hasenhüttl, Jurgen Klopp even. I mean, Rangnick is basically known as the father of the Gegenpress, that famous high press, counter pressing system that Jurgen Klopp apparently turned into heavy metal football, whatever you want to call it. I have to squeeze in a dig at the Scousers anyway, but and that's just the tactics. What he did to Hoffenheim and Leipzig to basically rebuild and turn them into a structurally sound club. I mean, that's legendary. It is what it is. I mean, imagine a United with identity and recruitment structure that exemplifies, high energy tactical mindset that Ralf Rangnick was really what he was famous for, really. I mean, scary hours when you think about it, right? Alas, though, it all went a bit pear-shaped when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer got sacked and Rangnick ended up taking over as interim boss after Michael Carrick's 4-match, I think it was 3 or 4 matches as caretaker when he was after being assistant coach under Ole. Rangnick probably did try to do a little too much during his interim boss time, and that I think was really the issue. Despite his kind of stubborn adherence to that 4-2-2-2, his team selection at times, I mean, he wasn't appointed to be manager. I think we all have to remind ourselves of that. This guy wasn't appointed to be the manager. He was meant to be sort of a pseudo director of football in like a consultancy capacity at the time. It was like a 2-year consultant contract, right? But you almost got the feeling with some of the decisions he was making and some of the comments he was making and some of the changes he was trying to implement in the dressing room, you kind of get the feeling that he was really pushing hard to get that permanent job, that it was almost like he was trying to really head start this project here. But, despite all that, United always made sure to refer to him only as interim boss. If you remember that, that's how they always referred to him. But again, I think he tried to do a little too much with the squad that really wasn't built for what he was doing at the time. Ronaldo couldn't press, right? You guys remember that. McTominay and Fred didn't quite have the footballing IQ to kind of work in that tactical system, recognizing pressing triggers, things like that. It wasn't working out that well. And I think Ragnick again tried to do a little too much with the players that he had, which most managers will try, but I think you clearly see it just went a little pear shaped, like I said. Add to that, the complete lack of overall fitness in the squad. It couldn't handle the high energy physical demands of Ragnick's counter pressing system, which meant it was only going to end one way for the German tactician. There were already including, murmurs of dressing room discontent. Players reportedly were not happy with his training methods. They even questioned his qualifications, because he hadn't managed in a very long time, which basically led to him eventually losing the dressing room altogether. And when you do that as a manager, I think the writing is on the wall, right? We've seen that many times. Under Ragnick, too, United finished sixth with their lowest points tally in Premier League history at that point, our worst defensive record in decades in terms of goals conceded. Under pressure, Ragnick famously criticized the squad, making his open heart surgery assessment during a press conference, which ruffled a few feathers in the United dressing room, but also in the United boardroom. Kind of embarrassed the board a little bit. The club ultimately decided to cut ties with Ragnick altogether, completely foregoing the whole consultancy role that he was brought in to do, which I think would have been an excellent appointment altogether. But it also would have been a little difficult having him around still, because he had already also agreed to take the job at the Austria national team as well. So to kind of having someone who was half in, half out wasn't really going to work out so well. And even really in that eventually consultant's role, it was never really clear what that meant, right? The job description was a bit fluffy. Ed Woodward was stepping down at that time. Arnold Murtaugh were stepping in. So nobody was really on the same page. Ragnick was probably promised one thing. New people were coming in. Everybody's kind of in the mix. But again, the point of today's episode is what if? What if Ragnick hadn't claimed that 10 new players were needed in the squad? What if, even after a poor performance as interim boss, the club ended up sticking by him, kind of towing that line of, hey, thank you for what you're doing. Now we're happy to have you upstairs. We're bringing in someone else. We trust you to do that. What if the club had kept him around, trusted him to build a new, competent, self-sustaining footballing structure? That's the big question of today. What would have happened? Well, first things first, again, like I just said, you would have seen a modern football structure. Ragnick's specialty has always been building sustainable systems. You look at RB Leipzig, look at the Red Bull Group in general. United might have finally established a coherent sporting hierarchy, separating recruitment and long-term planning from the short-term pressures of the manager. He famously, at the time, wanted Leipzig to actually appoint Paul Mitchell, if you remember, who's one of the most well-respected, well-known, just sporting directors at that time as well. This is when he was way back at Roma. What a way that would have been to kickstart a proper rebuild, right? This could have ended the cycle of managers kind of pushing for quick fixes, such as like Cristiano Ronaldo coming back, and instead focused on a more sustainable squad building structure that aimed to look for players who suit the system, who would build around them for the future, who are versatile, energetic. And this is what brings me to my next point. We would have seen a shift in this whole recruitment philosophy at the time. Instead of big name aging signings like Edinson Cavani, Cristiano Ronaldo, or even Casemiro, Ragnick would have likely targeted younger, physical, energetic players who suited the identity and suited the system that we were trying to go with at the time. But these players would have also had resale value. They would also have been flexible, versatile in the systems as well. Some of these players could play multiple positions, young, up and coming, top promising prospects in their respective positions. United may have gone for someone like the next Nkunku, Vardiol, Jelbazlai, instead of chasing, the shirt sellers, the statement signings, the reaction signings, all this kind of stuff. A scouting network resembling the Red Bull model might have been implemented as well, something that's more data-driven to identify undervalued and lesser-known talent on a global level, not just in Europe, but South America, Asia, maybe North America, maybe down in Mexico or something. Someone like the next Chucky Lozano, for instance. Remember, Ragnick is the guy responsible for Roberto Firmino, Sadio Mane, Deo Upamecano, Ibrahima Konate, Dominic Szoboszlai as well. At United, if you guys remember, Ragnick identified relatively unknown cheap targets for the club that were completely ignored. Talking guys like Julian Alvarez, Enzo Fernandez. He also pushed United to consider Joshko Vardiol, Christopher Nkunku, and even Erling Haaland, who was doing his thing at Borussia Dortmund. Yeah, that could have been our squad, these guys. Can you imagine that? It's insane. But in order to bring these players in, we had to get rid of some players, which is exactly what happened when Ragnick mentioned this needing open heart surgery at the club. Now, he wouldn't have just overseen the identification and the recruitment of top young talent. He would have also basically spearheaded a complete ruthless culling of the United squad at the time. That was still a bit of a Frankenstein piecemeal of multiple managers. It was shirt seller signings, big name signings, volatile, potentially kind of arrogant personalities who had little or no resale value, not just because of their age, but because of what we paid for them and the wages they were on. Sounds familiar, right? Now, he famously said we needed open heart surgery and at least 10 new players. As director of football or in that consultancy role, Ragnick might have overseen, again, the more ruthless clearing out of underperforming or the players that just did not fit the system a lot earlier than what we've seen recently under Amorim and Ineos. Instead of waiting until the 23-24 season to really start trimming the squad, the process could have started back in 2022. Again, could have started this process a couple years earlier. We might be a couple years ahead of where we were. His list of players, at the time that the club needed to sell included the likes of Cavani, Pogba, and Anthony Martial as well. These guys were all on the chopping block, according to Ralf Rangnick. But it wouldn't have just been players that Rangnick would have looked at. We would have seen a more stable process in terms of selecting and sticking and backing managers. We would have seen a manager for the long term. This is something that he's famously known for as well. Ragnick would have likely influenced the hiring of Ten Hag, or maybe pushed for someone more in line with his high pressing, high intensity philosophy. If Ten Hag, for instance, still had got the job, maybe Ragnick could have maybe had a hand in ensuring there was a proper squad backing to suit his tactics, rather than just come to some of these half measures of some players that Ten Hag didn't maybe want. Alternatively, as we saw what happened, Ten Hag wasn't interested in sharing power. The two might have butted heads, which meant Ten Hag maybe either would never have been appointed or he would have just simply been sacked sooner. Who knows? But maybe if that had happened, Ragnick would have gone for someone that he knew, maybe someone he trusted, maybe someone he saw as fitting the system that we were trying to build, the identity that we were trying to create at United. Maybe would have been here for a little while longer. You're looking at someone like Julian Nagelsmann, for instance, or maybe even Hansi Flick, who Ragnick actually recommended to Barcelona president John Laporta when it came to working with Barca's younger squad and getting the most out of them. The reason, big part of why Hansi Flick is at Barcelona is because of Ralf Ragnick's endorsement. This is how highly regarded Ralf Rangnick is in the footballing world. Like, that's just the way it is. Moving on, what we would have also seen here is a little bit of just an overall club culture reset. So when Ralf Rangnick rocked up to little old Hoffenheim in 2006, he was very ambitious with the direction he wanted the smaller club to kind of go in. One major facet of this reset for the club was to modernize the club culture and introduce things like sports psychology, data analysis, proper structure at the club. Unheard of for German clubs the size of like Hoffenheim and whatnot. In just over 4 years under Rangnick, Hoffenheim went from regional obscurity to a consistent Bundesliga presence. They finished 7th in their debut season, and they really stabilized themselves in the league. Now, United may not be as small as Hoffenheim, but we have struggled with there's a little bit of a disconnect between recruitment, football philosophy, and then there's actual performance. Really, a lack of an identity. Ragnick might have really introduced that identity with the pressing, the structured recruitment, and long-term squad planning, and that includes manager as well. Fans might have also seen a little bit more of a unified project, a direct continuation from a boardroom, owners, coaching, players. We would have seen a kind of a consistent connection between all that instead of this all over the place, reactionary, knee-jerk decisions that we've seen over the years. United probably would have started making the first steps towards becoming what modern footballing giants really look like in today's game, like really building a solid foundation that's self-sustaining and really just modern for the next several years, right? Now, it may have not all been bunnies and flowers. There are some potential cons here. Ragnick famously had a very blunt, very just no sugarcoating communication style. Again, the whole this squad needs surgery thing ruffled a few feathers, let's say that. You can argue that his track record of, just what he's done does entitle him to a bit of that arrogance. But again, his to the point, no sugarcoating honesty might have led to further conflict with players, with agents, with executives, with owners. It could have been not well received. United's board at the time, again, very at the time more conservative and very commercial focused, might not have been willing to accept either the kind of radical overhaul that he demanded. This board famously turned down Antonio Conte because, or Conte refused because we weren't able to commit to the kind of build that he needed. And Ragnick might have really just got annoyed with that and just up and left. There's also a chance, and we saw that had Ten Hag stayed, that Ragnick and Ten Hag would have butted heads. Like I said, Ten Hag didn't want to cede power. He resisted the board's pattern of signing superstars as well, Ragnick. And so I do think that there would have been a lot of conflict there. And it's nothing that can't be fixed. But again, it still would have been there most likely. But alas, at the end of the day, Ralf Rangnick was sacked after basically underperforming in a role that he wasn't even hired for. And I honestly believe that not only were we worse off as a result, but it did set our whole rebuild back several more years. Imagine what Ralf Rangnick could have done with just a couple of years behind the scenes in terms of just implementing a proper scouting and recruitment system, identifying these young players, guys like Enzo Fernandez, Julian Alvarez, so on and so forth, and really building for the long term with that. If he had stayed on in that consultancy role, United would have looked much more like the overall like RB Leipzig kind of structure. You get a younger, hungrier, high intensity squad. There's a clear tactical identity, a bit more, but all that, but with the spending power and the allure and the gravitas of Manchester United. You take what Leipzig are doing, which is what you see someone like Brighton doing, just identifying top young, like quality talent, but imagine that with some more spending power. It would have meant, yes, short-term pain. A ruthless rebuild always comes with short-term pain like we're seeing now. But I think we also would have seen a kickstart, a faster progression towards becoming that modern elite footballing operation that we're just now potentially starting to see us move towards. But instead of all that, United continued with this kind of lackluster hybrid, just kind of for appearance's sake model that has left us kind of trying to maybe pretend to move forward in all the wrong ways while still clinging to just, hey, we're United, that should be good enough. Like, it's just not been good enough. It seems like every time we try to maybe take a step forward, every time you think we're doing something, we still panic and we get the big name signing, we spend all this crazy money, and that's it. And as a result, we're steps behind our rivals, like several steps, and it's just now starting to maybe show signs of hope of getting forward. Now, again, this is another one of those episodes, where it's no fun to look at what might have been and only be reminded once again just how far behind we are thanks to the previous regime, how far the behind they've allowed us to slip. But again, we had the opportunity to really start this rebuild properly with one of the best talent identifiers, the best recruitment specialist, one of the best club builders in football, and we just let it go. We let it go, and we're suffered as who knows what might have been, but that's the whole point, right? That's why we do what we do. So let me know your thoughts on that. Were you annoyed that we let go of Rangnick? Do you wish you would have been here? Do you think we still would have had the same kind of Vivell, Wilcox? Or do you think we would have done the Paul Mitchell, maybe a Nagelsmann, maybe a Hansi Flick? You guys let me know what you think. As always, I'm Sean. This is a season 3 premiere of What If. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check the memberships if you like what you see and you want to suggest ideas for future episodes. Go check out the United vs. Everybody store. Leave a comment, let me know, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.